Hi, Dr. Isom here with the last lecture in the chapter on personality, stability, and change. This lecture is on personality change. Okay, one of the questions that I get, especially after students complete their 5-factor assessments, is, I don't like my personality, can I change? Is it possible to change? And when I was studying personality in graduate school, the belief at that point was really similar to William James's belief that personality is set in plaster at age 30. So you might see these fluctuations in personality, and we do, right? With young adults and teenagers, there are some pretty intense fluctuations sometimes in personality. But after about age 30, there really isn't a lot of change that happens. In the meantime, we know a lot more than that. We know that definitely personality can change. We know that personality is malleable. Personality responds to negative life events, positive life events, but we really don't know how much you can change personality. What we do know is that most people want to change at least some aspect of their personality. In fact, Hudson and Fraley asked people whether they wanted to change their personality, and 97% said that they wish they were more conscientious, and 89% wished that they were more agreeable. So when people say they want to change their personality, it's usually in the socially desirable direction. People want to be more extroverted, people want to be more agreeable, people want to be more conscientious and have lower levels of neuroticism. Along the line of personality traits are set in plaster at age 30, Costa and McCrae, who were known for developing the 5-factor model, argued not too long ago that personality traits are not changeable, and in fact, they're biologically programmed. But there's quite a bit of research evidence that suggests that that's not true. And although I agree that biology plays a big role in personality, it's not true that the biology that you're given in the form of genes that you inherit determines your personality. In fact, there's a substantial body of research that indicates there are several ways that a person could change their personality, and people have changed their personality under certain circumstances. And I'll talk about 4 different ways that people can change personality. The 4 potential methods for change are 1, psychotherapy, general interventions, targeted interventions at specific traits, and life experiences. We all know people that have had an intense life experience and that forever changed their personalities. Okay, let's talk about the first one, and that's psychotherapy. Psychotherapy has been shown to be effective for long-term behavior change, and it has shown to be really effective in reducing anxiety and increasing extroversion. Some research has indicated that doing psychotherapy can also lead to greater experiences of stress, as well as greater depression and neuroticism, and lowered self-esteem and conscientiousness. However, some of those studies that indicate these negative impacts include individuals that have had to undergo psychotherapy as a result of a court-mandated process, so they may not be representative for everyone. However, perhaps psychotherapy isn't the best way for all people to change their personality. Another complicating factor with psychotherapy, especially for people who are getting psychotherapy for anxiety disorders or depression, is that often clients are taking antidepressants at the same time that they're doing psychotherapy, which makes it difficult to disentangle how much of the personality change is related to the antidepressants and how much is related to the psychotherapeutic process. Another type of intervention that can change personality is more general interventions that are not directed at any one particular personality trait, but to the individual as a whole. One of these, for example, is intensive preschool programs for kids that were high risk. One example of a program that used this general type of intervention is Head Start, which was designed to provide resources and early intervention for kids of low socioeconomic status. Programs like Head Start showed some pretty dramatic effects. In fact, a report by the Brookings Institute indicated that kids that were involved in Head Start not only had a higher percentage of graduation from high school and attendance in college, they also showed significant social, emotional, and behavioral development, such as higher measures of self-control and self-esteem as adults. Another way you can change personality is with a targeted intervention, and these are interventions that are designed to address specific personality traits. These targeted interventions have been aimed at traits like openness, tolerance for stress, defensiveness, neuroticism and anxiety, narcissism, and things like self-control. With narcissism, part of the intensive intervention is to teach people to be able to empathize and gain the perspective of other people, or attempt to gain the perspective of other people. One of the targeted interventions with self-control that has been really effective is mindfulness meditation. And meditation has been shown to increase people's ability to have attentional control, to be able to focus on the task that you are engaged in and not be distracted by other things or negative thoughts. An example of a specific targeted intervention was created by Brown University to target anxiety and burnout. Brown University's Unwinding Anxiety program was designed to help physicians and nurses during this COVID-19 pandemic because they were having a huge problem with burnout and exhaustion. They developed an app that helped them to identify their anxiety-related thoughts and their anxiety-related behaviors, helped them to understand why they engaged in those behaviors, and to teach them mindfulness meditation techniques to be able to calm themselves down and calm their anxious thoughts. After 3 months of using the app and participating in the program, the physicians and the nurses showed a 57% decrease or reduction in clinically validated anxiety and a 20% reduction in exhaustion. So it was pretty effective. One of the things that I like to recommend for students, because it is a really effective app that teaches you to meditate and can increase your ability to tolerate stress and reduce your anxiety and even help you to sleep better, is an app called Headspace. I highly recommend this app, and it is a very clear and effective way to teach a person why meditation is important, how to meditate, and the positive benefits that you can obtain from meditation. Just another example of a targeted intervention. Both the Brown University Unwinding Anxiety program and the Headspace app are both targeted interventions designed to reduce anxiety. Here's another type of targeted intervention designed to change a personality trait. This is called the Sociogenomic Trait Intervention Model. In this model, there are several steps. The first step is that you have to have these two conditions be true. Number one, you really have to want to change that trait. And number two, you have to believe that actually changing that trait for you is possible. Okay, so you have to want to change and you have to believe that you can. The next thing you do is you'll make small little behavioral changes that are in the direction of the trait that you want to change. You need to make sure that you do this on a regular basis and practice these behaviors. The idea is that after much practice and engaging in those behaviors over and over and over again, they become habitual. And once behaviors are habitual, then they are now traits. For example, let's use this model for thinking about how a person might become more conscientious. Okay, first, if you want to be more conscientious, you have to have these two preconditions, right? One of them is that you have to want to change. You have to want to be more conscientious. Perhaps you are tired of being late everywhere you go. Perhaps you know that it's a problem when you don't go through your mail and pay your bills, when you don't call people back after you said you'd call them back. So that's the first precondition. You know that this is not something that you like about yourself and you want to change it. The second thing is that you have to believe that you can change. You have to decide that that's something that you really can do, that you're able to make the necessary behavioral changes right now to make this happen. The next thing that you would do is make small changes, small self-regulated behavioral changes. So this could be like always opening the mail as soon as you get it and paying bills right away. This could be writing down in a journal or a calendar every time you say you're going to call somebody and keep that list out there so that you follow through and call them back. This could include taking steps to make sure that you are not late and that you arrive places on time. And you continue engaging in those behaviors over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with rewarding yourself for being successful in making these changes as you practice these over and over and over again, until finally they become habitual and you're the type of person who gets the mail regularly, pays the bills right away, always calls people back when they say they will, and is always on time. Using the sociogenomic trait intervention model, you've been able to take your conscientiousness or your lack thereof, use these steps, and increase your levels of that trait. There is evidence that we'll talk about in the next chapter on the anatomy and physiology of personality that supports this model, because what we're really doing in this case is we're taking a little piece of Dan Adams' narrative identity, right? If you think that you're the kind of person who is just always late, doesn't follow through on promises, pays your bills late, doesn't like to get the mail, if that's who you are, you've created these expectations and this narrative identity of your levels of conscientiousness. When you engage in behaviors over and over and over again, you start to create physical changes in the brain that are related to your thoughts about yourself and your narrative identity, that when you engage in those behaviors enough, neuroplasticity occurs that helps to change the physical structures in the brain, including memories, that reconstruct your narrative identity into the more conscientious person. So this is a relatively new model, came out within the last 5 years or so, but I imagine there will be quite a bit more research on the idea of personality change using the sociogenomic trait intervention model. One other targeted intervention I want to mention has to do with increasing your levels of subjective well-being and happiness. There is definitely research that supports the idea that if you practice gratitude, whether you practice gratitude journaling, or if you just simply think of a couple of things each day that you're grateful for, that you're happy for, even if it's something as small as the sun's out or I woke up and I'm healthy, once you get into the model of thinking about how grateful you are for the things that you already have in your life, rather than thinking about the things that you wish you can change or the things that you don't have, you start developing a different mindset and you shift your thought from unhappiness to being more grateful and happy. So that is another targeted intervention. And like I said, it could be keeping a gratitude journal where you write down a couple of things each day, or even just thinking about it. For my family, at dinner time, everybody has to come up with their gratitudes. And it helps us think about the positive things that we already have in our life that we're grateful for, instead of focusing on the negatives, because it is so easy for all of us to focus on the negatives, particularly at a time of a lot of stress, like during the pandemic. Another thing that can be influential in changing personality is positive and negative life experiences. So starting an exercise program, going to college, beginning a new relationship, getting married, having children, all of those things can have dramatic impact on your personality. I know that when I started having kids, I couldn't express road rage anymore in the car because there were little ears that would repeat things. And so those kinds of social roles, like being a good mother, not teaching your children to swear at 2 years old, those tend to change your personality. Negative life experiences can also have an impact on personality. And these include things like developing a chronic disease, or losing a parent, or the death of a spouse. All of those things can have a dramatic impact in the short term and can also have a longer term impact on personality and can even change personality. Here's an interesting graph that shows the cumulative effect of negative experiences. And this shows, if you look on the left, where the person has experienced fewer negative life events, their ability to face threats and to be resilient it's okay, it's fairly good, but it's not as good as over here at the peak of the curve. This is the person who has experienced a moderate amount of negative life events. And so what this is saying is that it's better to experience some stress and some negative impacts in your life, because it actually increases your ability to be resilient, than if you don't ever experience anything, if you're completely protected from experiencing anything negative. But to the extent that you experience a large amount of negative effects, your ability to respond to those goes way down. So what this is saying is that facing adversity can be a positive thing, particularly if you're not overwhelmed by the adversity and you're able to fight your way out of it and get through it. However, to the extent that you are faced with tremendous amounts of adversity, that reduces your ability to be able to survive and to face those challenges, as you'll see on the right side of this curve. So some negative life experiences can have a positive impact on you, but too many negative life experiences can really have a detrimental effect, and a long-term detrimental effect. Some of these experiences include becoming unemployed, like I said, a death of a parent, death of a spouse, family member. Some positive things that still can be adversive depending on where you go are travel or military training. We probably all can think of somebody who joined the military and came back a completely different person, or maybe not completely different, but a much different person than they were when they left. Those kinds of events, those kinds of life experiences can have a large impact on a person's personality. So for people who have personality traits that they don't like, what are some obstacles that keep them from changing their personalities? Well, sometimes there are situations where a person doesn't see a negative aspect of themselves. This is particularly true for people who are very high in narcissism. They don't think that there's a problem with their personality. In fact, they think the problem is with everybody else's personality. But another reason why people don't want to engage in personality change is because it's hard. It takes effort, as we saw from the sociogenomic intervention model, that you have to actually practice. Not only do you have to engage in the behaviors and think about what you need to change, you have to practice those over and over and over again until they become something that is habitual for you. Also, it's really a lot easier just to blame all of the negative stuff in your life on other people. It's so much easier than taking responsibility for your own personality and the things that you can change. It's much easier to blame other people for your failures. Also, people like it when things don't change. Change is hard. People like consistency. Even if it's something negative, as long as they can predict it, that to a lot of people is better than the unknown. Changing something requires learning new skills. It requires acting in ways that are not normal for you, maybe uncomfortable. Maybe being on time, being 15 minutes early instead of being late is uncomfortable for you because you don't like to waste time. But it's one of those necessary behaviors if you want to eventually change that trait of being late. Here are 7 principles of personality continuity and change. These were developed by Caspi and colleagues, and we've talked about a couple of these, the cumulative continuity principle. We've also talked about the maturity principle. The plasticity principle is simply that personality can change. You can change your personality at any time. It's not going to be easy, probably, but you can change. The role continuity principle is that the role that you take on shapes the personality characteristics that you develop and that you reinforce and are stable during the time you take on that role, such as being a mother. There are certain personality characteristics that go along with that, including being more responsible, usually. Identity development principle is when people are attempting to maintain a stable sense or a stable identity of who they are, and then once they develop that identity, they behave in ways that are consistent with that identity. The social investment principle is that whatever we're socially connected to at the time has an impact on our personality and can cause our personality to stay the same or to change. And last, the corresponsive principle is that person-environment transactions, active, reactive, and evocative, can reinforce personality traits to make them more consistent or even magnify them over time. So personality is both stable and changeable. Is personality change a good or a bad thing? Well, it can be both. It's a good thing when you're able to change your personality in a way that is healthier for you, that is more in line with your values. But It can be a negative thing if your personality changes too much. If you have less stability and even inconsistency, like somebody with borderline personality disorder who has a hard time knowing who they are, where they end, and where the other person starts. Inconsistencies can cause problems for people. Back to the is personality change good? If you can take a personality trait that is not serving you, like really high levels of anxiety or high levels of neuroticism, and change it so that you become more emotionally stable, then yes, personality change is a good thing. So whether or not personality change is a good or a bad thing depends on what personality traits are changing. Consistent people are much easier to like, to predict, and because of that, easier to get along with. They're not unpredictable. You always know where you stand with them, and that's a comforting thing for a friendship. So when you're thinking about your own personality, and maybe there's a trait or two that you weren't particularly happy with in the Big 5 assessments, think about who you want to be, and then what do you need to do to make that happen? If we look at the different interventions, the different ways that you can change personality, you can change personality with psychotherapy by changing your beliefs, which then are thought to change your behavior. That's the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. Or you can use the sociogenomic trait intervention model to change your behavior, which then changes your beliefs and your habits. And by doing that, it changes your trait. There's many ways that you can change your personality to be the way you want it to be, if that's what you want to do. And that's it for this lecture.